はい、皆様こんにちは。ただいまから、フォーリンプレスセンターのオンラインプレスブリーフィングを開始します。私は本日司会を務めます広報戦略課の矢野と申します。よろしくお願いいたします。
We will start the online press briefing of the Foreign Press Center. I am Yano, Director, Media Relations Division, and I will serve as the moderator.
今月19日の敬老の日に、総務省が発表した日本の高齢者人口は推計3627万人、総人口に占める割合、いわゆる高齢化率は 29.1% で、いずれも過去最高を記録しました。高齢化率は2位で 24.1% のイタリアを大きく引き離して、世界200国のトップを走ります。一方で、昨年生まれた子どもの数は81万人で、過去最小となっており、日本の少子高齢化が一層鮮明になっております。
On the 19th of this month, on the Respect for the Aged Day, the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communication, MIC or 総務省, announced that the estimated number of senior citizens of Japan is 36.27 million, and the ratio of the elderly to the entire population is 29.1%. Both were record high. The elderly ratio is overwhelmingly higher than the number 2 country, Italy, whose ratio is 24.1%, and Japan is far ahead at the top of the 200 countries across the world. On the other hand, the number of babies born last year was 810,000 at a record low, and the trend of falling birth rate and aging of the population is intensifying in Japan.
フォーリンプレスセンターでは、この日本の社会経済の今後を考察する上で最も注目すべき課題である人口動態をメインテーマとしたブリーフィングを2020年度の後半にシリーズ化して実施いたします。
At our Foreign Press Center, we will organize a series of briefings in the latter half of 2022 with the main topic of demographics, the population dynamics, as it is the most noteworthy issue in order to inquire into the future of Japan's society and economy.
本日はその第1回目として人口変動から見る日本社会の行方をテーマに、この分野の調査研究の最前線でご活躍の国立社会保障人口問題研究所の岩沢美穂人口動向研究部長にお話しいただきます。
As the first of the series today, under the topic of population dynamics and the future of Japan, we have invited Dr. Miho IWASAWA, Director, Department of Population Dynamics Research at the National Institute of Population and Social Security Research, a leading expert at the frontline of research in this area.
まずはじめに岩沢さんから逐次通訳の時間を含めて約50分お話しいただき、残りの時間を質疑応答に当てさせていただきます。質問は外国メディアの方からお受けします。質問したい方はパソコンの画面下の Q&A から質問を書き込んでいただくか、手を挙げるのボタンで合図をしてください。Q&A の書き込みはブリーフィング開始後はいつでも可能です。
First of all, we will invite Dr. Iwasawa for the initial presentation of approximately 50 minutes, including the consecutive translation, and there will be time for questions and answers afterward. We will invite the foreign media to ask questions. If you wish to ask a question, please, you can text your question using the Q&A section at the lower part on the screen, or you can click the raise your hand button. And if you wish to text to the Q&A section on the screen, you can write your question anytime after the start of the briefing.
なお、本日のブリーフィングの日本語および英語の資料がダウンロードできる URL を1時間ほど前に皆様のメールアドレスにお送りしています。資料をお持ちでない方は画面下の Q&A 欄に書き込みをお願いいたします。資料のリンクを記載いたします。
For your information, the URL where you can download today's presentation, both in the Japanese and English language, has been sent to your email addresses about 1 hour ago. If you have not received this information, please text that information in the Q&A section so that we can send you the link.
本日の通訳者は株式会社サイマルインターナショナルの大野理恵さんです。
Today's interpreter is Ms. Rie Ono of Simul International.
それでは、岩沢さん、よろしくお願いいたします。
Dr. Iwasawa, the screen is yours.
はい、皆様、こんにちは。国立社会保障人口問題研究所の人口動向研究部、岩沢美穂と申します。研究所では5年に一度実施される首相動向基本調査や、国勢調査に基づいて行われる日本の将来推計人口の策定を担当しております。
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the introduction. I am Miho IWASAWA, Director of the Department of Population Dynamics Research at the National Institute of Population Social Security Research. Based on the every 5-year Japanese National Fertility Survey, or based on the census at our National Institute, I am responsible for the official population projection for Japan.
本日の報告の前半では、世界と日本の人口の状況を説明し、また人口変動のメカニズムを説明します。後半では人口の側面から日本社会の未来像を説明します。
In the first part of this presentation, I will discuss about the status of the population across the world and in Japan, and I will also explain about the mechanism of demographic population changes. In the latter part, I will talk about the future projection of the Japanese society and community from the perspective of population.
実は人口というものは社会にとって炭鉱のカナリアのような役割があります。他の社会経済指標よりも将来見通しをいち早くつかむことができ、来たるべき問題に備える時間を与えます。
In fact, the population can play the role of the so-called canary in a coal mine for the society and the community. That is because, in the case of population, compared to other socio-economic indicators, this can detect the future projection earlier and will give us some time to prepare for the upcoming challenges.
今回は2つの視点で未来についてお話しします。1つ目はほぼ確実に到来する未来の話です。こうした状況に伴う問題をどう乗り越えるかが日本社会の課題となります。次に、日本社会が持つ潜在力について示し、それを生かすことにより未来の社会をより生きやすく活力のあるものに変えられる可能性を示します。
Today, I will discuss the future from two perspectives. The first is about the future, which most certainly will occur. And then with regard to issues that will occur in line with the projection, it would be the challenge of the Japanese society to how to overcome those expected challenges. And next, I will indicate the positive potentials of the Japanese society. And by leveraging such advantages, I will discuss the possibility that we can transform the future society for the better, so that it will be more easier and convenient to live and could be more active and vibrant.
こちらは皆さんにも馴染みがある世界地図です。地域別に色分けしています。北極に近い部分はやや面積が課題となっていることに注意が必要ですが、ロシア、中国、オーストラリア、米国、ブラジルなど、大きな国があることがわかります。
This is the world map that you are also familiar with, and this is colored according to the different regions. We have to take note that areas closer to the North Pole is indicated larger than relatively it is. However, we can observe that there are indeed large countries including Russia, China, Australia, the United States, or Brazil.
こちらは先ほどの国を2018年の人口の大きさで面積を表現しましたカルトグラムと呼ばれる地図です。つまり先ほどの地図は国土や資源の大きさを示していると言える一方で、こちらの地図は労働人口やマーケットの大きさを示していると言えます。
And this is what is called the cartogram type of map. So this indicates the population size as of 2018 in terms of the size of area, which means the earlier map, the prior page, can be said that it indicates the size of the land mass or the abundance of the natural resources. And this cartogram can be called to indicate the size of the working population or the market.
インドと中国が格段に大きいこと、そして東南アジア、日本も決して小さくないことがわかります。アジアの存在感が大きく、またロシアやオーストラリアは国土は日本の何倍もありますが、人口はそれほど大きくないということがわかります。
What we can observe is that India and China, they are overwhelmingly large, but then Southeast Asia or Japan, neither are they small. We can observe that Asia's presence is very large. In the case of Russia and Australia, in terms of the land mass, the land area, it is so many times larger than Japan, but it indicates that the population is not that large.
これは2022年の人口規模トップ30の国のリストです。
This indicates the list of countries in the top 30 in terms of the population size as of 2022.
ブルーで示したのが先進国で、日本はアメリカに次ぐ大きさです。中国、インドの人口がダントツに多いわけですが、緑で示したアフリカの国もいくつか入っていることがわかります。
The countries indicated in blue are the developed economies, and Japan is the second following the United States. We can see that China and India's population, these are overwhelmingly large, but then the green countries, those are in Africa, these are also included in these top countries.
では、将来がどうなるか見てみましょう。こちらは全世界の地域別人口割合を過去、現在、将来について見たものです。
Then we will look at the future projection. This graph indicates the ratio of the population across the world in terms of the past, present, and future.
先進国の占める割合が次第に小さくなり、現在はインドと中国が大きい割合を示します。しかし、2070年になると、青紫で示したアフリカの存在感が大きくなります。日本の人口は現在 2% 弱を占めますが、2070年には 1% を下回ります。
This graph indicates that the ratio occupied by the advanced economies will gradually decline. At the moment, India and China accounts for a larger proportion. However, by 2070, the blue-purple, which indicates Africa, that presence will become larger. As for the population of Japan, currently it is slightly below 2%, but by 2070, it will go below 1%.
ただし先進国においては日本は今後もそれなりの存在感を示すことになります。現在アメリカに次いで1割程度の構成比を占めますが、50年後も 7% とそれなりの大きさを占めることが見込まれます。
However, amongst the developed economies, Japan will continue to have a certain degree of presence into the future. Currently, Japan's ratio follows the United States and is approximately 10% or so. But 50 years from now, it is still around 7% and expected to show a certain degree of presence.
では、より中長期視点で日本の人口がどのように変化するのか、なぜそうした変化が起きるのかを示したいと思います。
Now, from a more medium and longer-term perspective, I would like to discuss how Japan's population will change going forward and why such changes will occur.
これは古代から現在までの日本の人口の推移です。
This indicates the long-term population trend of Japan from the ancient times to the present.
日本の人口が急激に増えたのは明治時代以降です。明治時代に入った直後は3500万人でしたが、それから、現代まで150年で1億2000万人まで駆け上がります。
It was the Meiji era and beyond when Japan's population increased rapidly. Right after the start of the Meiji era, the population was 35 million. But then from that time until the present, in the last 150 years or so, there was a rush, a rapid rise up to 120 million.
こうした近代化に伴う急速な増加は人口に限らず資源の消費量などにも起こっており、近年では大加速と呼ばれています。日本の近代化の時期と重なるわけです。
This kind of rapid increase in accordance with the modernization is not observed only in population rise. It also happens in terms of the increase of resources consumption, and in the recent time, it is called the Great Acceleration. And this is the same timing when Japan modernized.
さて、こちらは今後の人口の予測を追加したものです。2017年の社人権の、将来推計人口を示しています。推定値の違いによって幅が想定されますが、いずれの過程でも急速な人口減少になります。現代の日本は急激な人口増加の時代から急激な人口減少の時代に転換する歴史的な、特別な時代を経験しているということです。
This indicates the projected population going forward, and this indicates the National Institute's official population projection back in 2017. Depending on the different assumptions that have been utilized, there could be some ups and downs or deviations, but regardless of which assumption was used, it indicates that there will be a rapid decline in the population. In Japan, as of today, this is at the timing of a transition from a time of rapid population increase to a time of rapid population decline. So it means that Japan now is experiencing a historically special, extraordinary time.
なお、現在の状況が続けば、100年後、日本の人口は現在の半分以下になることが予想されています。
And by the way, if this current circumstance continues, it is expected that within 100 years from now, Japan's population will be below half of what it is now.
先ほど古代からの推移でしたが、こちらは過去100年、今後100年のスパンで見た推移です。
The earlier graph indicated the trend from the ancient times to the present, and this graph indicates the trend at the span of the last 100 years and the coming 100 years.
このような100年間の急激な増加と次の100年間の急激な減少はとても単純なメカニズムで実現します。続いて人口変動のメカニズムを確認してみましょう。
This kind of rapid increase in the 100 years and then a rapid decrease in the coming 100 years. These happen due to extremely simple mechanism. So let us confirm the mechanism of a population dynamic changes.
こちらが人口学的方程式といわれる人口増減の仕組みを示した式です。大変シンプルです。翌年の人口というのは、今年の人口に出生数を足して死亡数を引き、外国から流入する人口を足して、外国へ流出する人口を引けば求められます。
This is what is called the demographic equation, and this is the mathematical equation to indicate the mechanism of ups and downs of the population, and it is extremely simple. In order to calculate the population of the following year, you add the number of birth to the population of the present year, deduct the number of death, and then add the inflow from outside the country and deduct the country that outflow out of your country.
出生数の方が死亡数より多ければ人口は増加しますし、少なければ人口は減ります。流入の方が流出より多ければ、やはり人口にはプラスの影響となります。
Which means if the birth is larger than the death, the population will rise, and if the birth is smaller, then the population will go down. If the inflow is larger than the outflow, it will be a positive increase.
つまり今後の出生数を決める出生率、死亡数を決める死亡率、国際人口移動を決める出入国のパターンの変化が今後の人口を決めます。実際に社人権が5年に一度作成する将来推計人口では、ファティリティ、モータリティ、インターナショナルマイグレーションに関する過程を設定します。
Which means the fertility going forward, which determines the number of birth, and the mortality that determines the number of death, and the international migration going in and out of the country. These changing patterns of immigration will determine the population going forward. And in fact, our National Institute, when we prepare the population projections every 5 years, indeed the fertility, mortality, international migrations are the assumptions that we establish.
ここで日本の人口を把握するためのデータソースを示しておきます。人口変動を捉えるためには、一つ前のスライドにあったような人口、出生、死亡、国際人口移動のデータが必要です。
And this is the data source in order to project Japan's population, in order to observe the changes in the population, as was shown in the prior slide. The data of the population, birth, death, international migration will be required.
人口は国勢調査から得ますが、国勢調査のない年は総務省による人口推計を使います。出生数、死亡数は厚労省の人口動態統計を使います。国際人口移動は法務省の出入国管理統計を使った総務省の人口推計から得ることができます。
The population data can be acquired from the census, but in the years where census does not take place, then we use the population estimate by 総務省, the MIC, and the number of the birth and the death. We use the vital statistics of MHLW. As for international migration, we use MIC, 総務省 the population estimate, which is based on the Immigration Services Agency's data of inflow and outflow of the people.
将来については人口動態のいずれも国立社会保障人口問題研究所の日本の将来推計人口の数値、特に中位推計を使います。世界の将来推計人口は国連によるワールドポピュレーションプロスペクツを使います。
Regarding the future projections for both the population and the changes of the population, we have used the numbers from our own National Institute's population projections for Japan, and in particular, we have used the medium variant. As for the global projection of the population, we have used the World Population Prospects of the United Nations.
人口が増加していた時代は子供を産む若者が多く、出生数が多い一方で、高齢者が少なく、死亡数が少なかったわけです。この時期は日本から海外、例えば南米やハワイなどに出る移民も多くありました。
At the time when the population was rising, this was the time when there were many younger generation who would have children, and there was a high number of birth. At the same time, there were not many elderly population, and the number of death was small. During this time, there were many immigrants who left Japan for other countries such as Latin America or Hawaii, for example.
2000年頃は出生数と死亡数が均衡していました。
At around the year 2000, the number of birth and death were almost the same.
では将来について実際に出生、死亡、移動などはどのような過程が行われていたのかを見てみましょう。
And then we will look at what kind of assumptions were actually utilized in order to project the birth, death, and migration going forward.
こちらは出生力の過程を合計出生率の形で示したものです。
The assumption of the fertility is indicated on this slide in terms of total fertility rate.
合計出生率について2065年で中位家庭では 1.44 と仮定されています。現在は 1.3 程度なので、それよりも高いですが、人口規模が長期的に安定するために必要な 2.1 は大きく下回っています。
In terms of total fertility rate, the median variant is assumed to be 1.44 as of 2065. The current level is 1.3 or so, so that is slightly higher, but the required 2.1 in order to maintain the population size on a longer term in a stable manner, compared to that, it is significantly lower.
死亡に関しては平均寿命の過程を示しています。
Regarding mortality, this is the assumption of life expectancy.
平均寿命は一貫して上昇すると見通され、2065年、男性は 84.95 年、女性は 91.35 年と仮定されています。
The life expectancy is expected to rise constantly, and it is estimated that by 2065, the expectancy for man will be 84.95 years, and for women, 91.35 years.
これは外国人の入国超過数、すなわち日本に入ってくる外国人と日本から出ていく外国人の差分の実績と将来仮定値です。横軸は年次で縦軸が数です。2035年には年間6万9000ほどの入国超過数を見込んでいます。
This indicates the number of net migrations. That is, this is the difference of non-Japanese entering Japan and non-Japanese leaving, departing the country of Japan, both in terms of the actual results and the future estimate. The horizontal axis indicates the year, and the vertical axis are the numbers of the people. By 2035, we expect that the net inflow will be around 69,000 per year.
つまりここで示されている2015年以降の人口減少は以上のような仮定を置いた結果です。
Which means the population decline projected from 2015 and beyond, which is indicated here, is based on the assumptions that I have just outlined.
今後は子どもを産む若い世代が減少し、出生力も低下する一方で、高齢者が多いため死亡が多く発生するので、死亡数が出生数を大幅に上回り、人口が減少します。
Going forward, there will be fewer younger generation who would have babies, but the fertility will go down and there will be a larger number of senior citizens, which means there will be a larger number of deaths, which means the number of deaths will be significantly above the number of birth, and the population will go down.
そうですね。はい。ただし、日本に出入りする外国人は、毎年7万人ほど入国超過となり、人口減少が部分的に緩和すると予想されています。
Regarding the non-Japanese who will enter or depart the country of Japan, it is estimated to be a net inflow of around 70,000 per year, and it is expected to moderate or alleviate the population decline partly.
ここまでは人口の規模の変化を見てきましたが、ここで人口を考える上でもう一つ重要な視点として人口構造に着目してみます。
So far, I have indicated the changes in the size of the population, and now we will look at another important perspective in order to study population, which is the structure of the population.
これは日本の1953年の人口ピラミッドと2065年のピラミッドです。実は両方とも人口規模はほぼ8800万と同水準です。しかし年齢構造が全く異なることがわかります。
This indicates the population pyramid for Japan, 1953 and for 2065. But in fact, the total population are almost the same for the two different years at around 88 million. However, you can observe that the structures are entirely different.
2060年は、若年人口が少なく高齢者が多い社会となります。こうした人口高齢化は近代化を経た社会が必然的に経験するものです。
By 2065, the younger population will be smaller, and there will be a larger number of senior citizens. This kind of aging of the population will almost by necessity be experienced by modernized societies.
人口に占める65歳以上人口の割合、高齢化率の変化を主要国について示しています。
And this is the elderly ratio, the ratio of 65 years and above to the total population for major economies.
20世紀の前半では欧州地域の高齢化率が高く、日本は低く推移していました。すなわち若者が多く、高齢者が少ない社会だったわけです。しかし1990年頃から急激に上昇し、現在世界でトップクラスの高齢化率になっています。
In the first half of the 20th century, the elderly ratio was higher in the European region, and it was low in Japan, which means there were many younger generation with fewer senior citizens. However, from around 1990, the elderly ratio started to rise rapidly, and currently Japan has the highest elderly ratio in the world.
この後は韓国など日本よりも高齢化率が高くなる国が現れます。日本が高齢社会をどう乗り切るか、世界が注目しています。
Going forward, there will be other countries whose elderly ratio will be even higher than that of Japan, such as Republic of Korea. All the world is paying attention to Japan as to how Japan will overcome this aging society.
高齢化率のほかにもう一つ重要な指標に従属人口指数があります。
In addition to the elderly ratio, there is another important indicator, which is the dependency ratio.
これは子どもと高齢者というある程度ケアが必要な人口を分子に15から64歳という働く年齢層の人口を分母にした指標です。
This is an indicator where the numerator will be the children and the senior citizens, which means the population who do require a certain degree of care by other people, divided by the denominator, which is the working age population between 15 to 64 years old.
働き盛りの人がどのくらい子どもと高齢者を支えるかという指標で、指標の値が大きいほど社会の負担が大きく、小さいほど負担が軽いことを意味します。
This indicates how many children and senior citizens can be supported by the working age population, and which means if the indicator is larger, this means the burden, the workload on the community and society will be large, and if the indicator is smaller, it will be less burdensome.
こちらは日本の1900年くらいから従属人口指数の推移を示したものです。
This is the trend of the dependency ratio in Japan from around the year 1900.
社会が近代化すると、一度だけ、子どもと高齢者が少なく従属人口指数が低下し、経済成長に、有利な時期が生まれます。人口学的配当、あるいは日本では人口ボーナスと言われています。日本は1990年代がその時期でした。今後は高齢者人口が増えるので、従属人口指数は上昇していきます。
When the societies modernize, there will be only one time in which there will be a fewer number of children and the senior citizens, and the dependency ratio will go down, meaning that it will be a one-time period where it will be advantageous for economic growth. This is called the demographic dividend. In the case of Japan, it was in the 1990s, and we also call it the population bonus in Japan. Going forward, the senior citizens population will increase and the dependency ratio will rise.
このグラフは従属人口指数の推移を世界各国で示したものです。
This graph indicates the dependency ratio for different countries.
ヨーロッパや日本はすでに人口ボーナスの時期を過ぎていますが、現在、中国やアメリカが人口ボーナスを迎えています。しかし今後は負担が再び増える時代を迎えます。21世紀後半はアフリカの国が人口ボーナスを迎えます。
In the case of Europe and Japan, already we have gone past the timing of the demographic bonus or dividend, and currently that the dividend or bonus are enjoyed by China and the United States. However, going forward, they will experience a period where the burden will rise. In the latter half of the 21st century, it will be African countries that will now enjoy the demographic bonus.
では、日本の未来の姿を見ていきましょう。以下では2つの視点で将来像をお示ししたいと思います。
We will now look at the future of Japan. I will try to project the future vision from the following two perspectives.
1つ目はほぼ確実に訪れるであろう予見できる未来です。ある意味、日本社会がこれから乗り越えなければならない課題ということになります。2つ目は、そうした課題をどう乗り越えるかのヒントになる人口の視点から言える日本社会の持つ潜在力というものを示したいと思います。
The first is the foreseeable future, which will almost definitely occur. So in a certain sense, these can be called the challenges that the Japanese society will have to tackle with and overcome. And the second is, it could possibly be some hint for us to think about how to overcome all those challenges from Japan's population perspective. And I would like to indicate such potentials of the Japanese society.
1つ目の予見できる未来では、次の5つの変化を示したいと思います。まず、多数派になる高齢者と低出生力の罠というものについて説明します。
Regarding the foreseeable future, I will look at the 5 changes shown on the slide. First, I will discuss about the society where the elderly will become the majority, and also about the low fertility trap.
これは日本の男女別、年齢層別、有権者の割合を円グラフで示したものです。1980年、2015年、2045年について示しています。
These pie charts shows the ratio of the voters in terms of different gender and by age brackets, showing for the years 1980, 2015, and 2045.
下にある黒い枠で囲った部分が60歳以上の有権者を示しており、有権者が高齢化していることがわかります。2045年には有権者の半数が60歳以上となります。高齢者の政治的な力や消費者としての存在感が増すことになります。
In the lower part of each of the pie chart, there is an encircled area by the black line, and this indicates the voters 60 years old and above, and these charts indicate that the voters are becoming older. By 2045, more than half of the voters will be 60 years or older. The potential of the senior citizens in terms of political influence or the presence as the consumers will rise.
別の見方をすると、出生数、若年人口が減少することで、若年者には生きづらい社会になる恐れがあります。
Or, in a different perspective, we might be able to say that because of the declining number of birth, as well as the younger population, there could be a risk that it might become a society where it would be difficult for the younger generation to live.
子ども、若者が減ると、子ども関連の市場やサービスが失われ、ますます子育てにコストがかかるようになり、それがさらなる出生減につながります。こうした負の連関は低出生力の罠と呼ばれています。 つまり高齢化が進み、若年人口の相対的に少ない社会では、若年者の意思が政治に反映されにくく、若年の生活が不便になりやすいので、それを是正する仕組みを積極的に構築する必要があります。
If the number of children and the younger generation decline, there will be child-related markets and services that will be lost or shrink, and it will become even more expensive to raise children, and that would further reduce the number of birth. So this kind of negative chain reaction is called the low fertility trap. That is, when aging of the population occurs, and when the population's younger generation becomes relatively smaller, in such societies and communities, the will and the intention of the younger generation will be less reflected or heard by the politics, and the younger generation's lives might become inconvenient. And therefore, there must be proactive policies in order to correct these situations.
20世紀後半の日本の少子化は、結婚が起こりにくいという形で進みました。現在は50代の未婚者が増えていますが、2030年代以降になると65歳以上で未婚化が進むと予想されます。
Japan's declining birth rate in the latter half of the 20th century occurred because of less people getting married. In the present time, there are increasing number of never married persons in their 50s, but from the 2030s and onwards, it is expected that non-married persons or never married persons at 65 years old or above will increase.
こちらは男女別に65歳以上人口の配偶関係別の構成について、過去の実績と将来予測を見たものです。横軸は年次です。青い部分が未婚者割合、オレンジが有配偶者割合です。
This indicates the structure of the population 65 years old and above for different genders in terms of the spousal relationship or the situation and the actual situation of the past as well as the future projections. The horizontal axis shows the year, and the blue portion indicates the proportion never married, and the orange is the proportion married.
65歳以上では、かつては男性は8割が有配偶者という状況でした。しかし今後は未婚者の割合が増えていきます。女性についても子供がいない未婚者が増えていきます。
For the age bracket 65 years and above, in the past, 80% of the men were married. However, going forward, the proportion of never married will increase. As for the woman, there will also be never married without children.
つまり65歳以上人口で、独身である人が増えます。こうした人たちは単身で生活することも多いため、今後はこうした単身高齢者の生活をどのように、社会的に支えるかが課題となります。
Which means that for the population bracket of 65 years and above, there will be many people who would be single. And these non-married persons tend to live alone in a household, which means that going forward, the challenge would be how to provide social support for such single person household.
予見される未来の最後は日本の地域社会に着目します。
At the final part of the projected future, I will look at the local communities of Japan.
これは日本の都道府県の人口を示したものです。縦軸が緯度、横軸が経度で、バブルの大きさは総人口の大きさを示しています。左が2015年、右が2045年です。
This indicates the population of the prefectures in Japan. The vertical axis will be the latitude, and the horizontal is the longitude. And the size of the bubble, the circle, indicates the population size. The left-hand side is year 2015, the right-hand side 2045.
全体的に2015年よりも2045年の方がバブルの大きさが小さくなっているのですが、特に東北や四国などの地方の減少が著しく、こうした地域では地域社会を維持できるかが大きな課題となっています。首都圏は人口はあまり減りませんが、別の問題が予想されます。
Overall, compared to 2015, the year 2045 indicates that the bubble sizes will be smaller, but in particular, regions such as Tohoku and Shikoku are expected to have larger decline. And in such regions, a major difficult challenge will be whether local communities can be maintained. In the case of Tokyo metropolitan area, the population decline is not that large, but there will be other challenges.
こちらは先ほどのグラフを総人口ではなく65歳以上人口の大きさでバブルを示したものです。
This indicates not in terms of the total population as was shown in the prior graph, but now the bubble sizes indicate the population of 65 years or older.
首都圏では65歳以上の人口が今よりも増加します。大量の高齢者の生活を支える仕組みを作ることが急務です。
In the Tokyo metropolitan area, the population of 65 years old or higher will be larger than present, which means it is an urgent challenge for us to create mechanisms and systems in order to support the lives of a large number of senior citizens.
このように多くの人口に関わる課題を抱える日本ですが、一方で日本の人口はさまざまな潜在力を持っています。それをご紹介します。
As I have indicated, the country of Japan indeed does face so many challenges related to the population, but at the same time, Japan does have lots of various potentials, which I will indicate.
ここに今後の日本社会が持つ潜在力を4つ挙げました。1つ目は高齢者の高学歴化です。
This slide indicates four of the potentials that the Japanese societies have. And the first point is that there will be more highly educated elderly people going forward.
これは20歳以上の人口の年齢構造を2020年と2065年で比較したものです。高齢者の人口が大きく増えることがわかります。
This compares the age-specific structures of the population 20 years old or above and comparing the years of 2020 and 2065. It indicates that the population of the elderly will increase largely.
先ほどのグラフを学歴水準別で色分けしてみました。色が薄い部分は低学歴者、濃い部分は高学歴者です。将来については現在の若者の状況を固定した推計値です。
The earlier graph now is differently colored according to the academic background of the population. The lighter colored portions means lower education level, and the deeply colored areas shows the higher academic background population. As for the future projection, it is based on the assumption of the fixed situations of the current younger generation's academic background.
2020年の段階では高齢者に高学歴者は少ないことが分かりますが、2060年になると高学歴者の高齢者が増加します。人的指標の高い高齢者が増えるということです。
As of year 2020, there were not many highly educated elderly populations. However, by 2065, this graph indicates that there will be an increase of elderly population with a higher educational background. This means that there will be an increase of the senior citizens with larger human capital.
また、高齢者の健康状態も時代とともに良くなり、若返っています。つまり、これまでとは違う高齢者の活躍が期待できるかもしれません。
Also, as the time passes, the health situation of the senior population is improving, and in fact, the older people are getting younger in a sense, which means we might be able to expect more active, vibrant, and lively participation for the elderly, unlike what it used to be going forward.
次に日本の女性に着目します。
And next, paying attention to the woman in Japan.
こちらは OECD が出している高等教育者の男女比、女性の割合です。グラフの高さが高いほど高学歴者に占める男女比で女性が多いことを意味しています。
This is the data according to OECD, and this shows the gender ratio and the ratio of women who have had higher educational background. This indicates if the graph level is higher, this means that in terms of gender ratio, there are a larger number of women who have a high academic background.
多くの先進国で、高等教育者の男女比は女性の方が高いことが分かります。しかし、右の方にある日本は男性の方が高く、高所得者の中では得意です。つまり日本は今後さらに、女性の高学歴化が進む余地があるということです。
In many of the developed economies, comparing the gender of those who have received higher education, you can see that the women are more highly educated. In the case of Japan, it is shown closer to the right-hand side, and the men ratio is higher, which means Japan is rather unusual amongst the high-income countries, which means going forward, there is still some room for Japan to observe a woman becoming more highly educated.
2010年以降、日本では働く母親の支援が進みました。このグラフは、子どもが小さい時に働いている母親の割合の時代変化を示したものです。
From the year 2010 and onwards, there were increased support for working mothers. This graph indicates the ratio of mothers who are in the labor force whilst their child is little, and this shows the changes of the proportion according to the years.
真ん中のグラフは子どもが3歳未満の場合の母親の就業割合です。以前は 25% 程度しか働いていませんでしたが、2010年以降は働く母親が増え、現在7割近くの母親が働いています。まだ上昇する余地が残されています。
The graph in the middle indicates the proportion of mothers in the workforce whose child is 0 to 2 years old or not reached 3 years old. In the past, only 25% or so were working, but from the year 2010 and onwards, mothers started to work increasingly, and at the present time, about 70% of mothers with those little children are working, and there is still room for this percentage to rise.
つまり先ほどの高齢者の増加と合わせて考えると、日本は今後生産年齢人口が減少しますが、これまでより高齢者と子育て世代の女性が活躍する余地があるということです。
Considering this projection and also considering the increase of the senior citizens that I discussed earlier, in the case of Japan, the working age population going forward will decline. However, compared to what it used to be in the past, there is still room in Japan for the senior citizens and child care aged women to be more active in the society.
次に子どもの状況に着目します。社会の再生産を考える場合、出生数の多寡だけではなく、その子どもが安全にリソースを得て育てられているかということにも目を向ける必要があります。
And now looking at the circumstances of the children, in order to study the reproduction of societies, not only do we have to look at the number of birth, whether that is large or small, but we also need to pay attention to the children's circumstances and environment, whether they are being nurtured in a safe environment with access to resources.
日本は出生力が低いと言われていますが、実は10代の出産が少ないという特徴を持っています。
Japan is considered to have low fertility. However, there is a characteristic of Japan that there is a low level of teenage birth.
これは主要国の年齢別出生率を見たものです。横軸は年齢で、縦軸がその年齢の出生率です。
This looks at the fertility for age-specific women, and the horizontal axis shows the age, and the vertical axis is the fertility of that age.
先進国の中には英語圏の国を中心に10代の出生率が高い国があります。このような国では若年出産をした女性が低学歴にとどまる問題や母子の貧困などの問題を抱えています。
Amongst the developed economies, mainly in the English-speaking countries, there are some countries where there is a high level of teenage giving birth to babies. In these kind of countries, they face the challenges that women who have given birth at younger ages tend to stay at low education levels, or challenges such as poverty of mother and child.
日本ではこうした10代の出生率が低いことは母子のウェルビーイングにとってはいいことであると考えられます。これは今後 AI 化が進み、働く人がますます高度な労働生産性が求められる時代には有利となります。
In the case of Japan, the fact that the teenage birth is low, this is considered to be a positive for the well-being for the mother and the children. Going forward, as AI permeates through our society, and in the era when a high level of labor productivity will be demanded of the working population going forward, this means this is an advantage.
最後に日本における外国から日本に入ってくる人口移動の潜在力を説明します。
Finally, I will discuss about the non-Japanese entering the country of Japan, the potential of migration coming into Japan from other countries.
これは OECD が出している各国における外国生まれの人口の割合です。ヨーロッパの国々は 10% から 20% の水準ですが、左の方にある日本はまだ数%です。
This is the data of OECD looking at the ratio of foreign-born as percentage of the total population. In the European countries, this percentage is somewhere between 10 to 20%, and Japan is shown closer to the left edge, which is still in the single digit.
今後日本が他の先進国と同程度にまで外国人を受け入れれば、人口減少がある程度緩和されるかもしれません。
Going forward, if Japan hosts a larger number of non-Japanese at the level equivalent to other advanced economies, it is possible that the population decline might be alleviated to a certain degree.
こちらは先ほど示した日本における外国人、入国超過数、に、2015年以降の実績を追加したものです。
This indicates the number of net migration of non-Japanese who have entered our country, and now I have added the actual results from beyond 2015.
2000年頃までは毎年5、6万人程度の入国超過でした。したがって2017年に行った公的な将来推計は、今後毎年7万人程度の入国超過数があると見込んでいました。
Until around the year 2000, the net inflow was around 50,000 to 60,000 per annum, and therefore, according to the official future population projection as of 2017, it was estimated that going forward, the net inflow per year would be around 70,000.
しかし、新型コロナ感染拡大の直前では、さらに多くの年間20万人の入国超過数を記録していました。コロナの時期は入国が減少しましたが、現在では外国人の入国に対する水際対策も撤廃され、また特定技能の受け入れ制度も始まりましたので、今後、日本に来る外国人が増える可能性があります。
Up until the spread of COVID-19, there was even larger net flow at around 200,000 migrant inflow per year. During the COVID pandemic, the entry into Japan went down, but by now, the border control for the entry of non-Japanese has been eliminated, and the system to host specified skilled workers have also been started. Therefore, there is a possibility that there will be an increase in non-Japanese arrival into Japan.
日本にはアジアからの流入が多いのですが、アジアの経済力が上がってきていることも、有能な労働力の流入が期待できる要素です。
In the case of Japan, quite a lot of people come from Asia, but the reason that Asia's economic power are rising also is another factor that gives us the expectations that we might be able to expect the inflow of highly skilled workforce.
ちなみにこれは日本に入ってきている外国人の年齢分布です。横軸が年齢、縦軸が入国者です。
This indicates the age distribution of non-Japanese who come to Japan. The horizontal axis is the age, and the vertical is the number of arrival.
外国からの流入は20代での留学生や就職者が多いため、若い働く世代の人口が増えることになります。
Many of the people who come from other countries largely are in their 20s. They are either students or are seeking jobs, which means that there will be an increase of younger working age generation.
では、まとめとしまして、人口から見た日本社会の将来像というものを申し上げます。
By way of a summary, I would like to discuss about the future vision of the Japanese society in terms of population.
まず、日本の人口は2000年代をピークにすでに人口減少局面に入っています。現在、日本人口は世界の 2% 弱を占めますが、50年後には 1% 以下の存在感になります。ただし、先進国の中ではアメリカに次ぐ大きさを示し、50年後も 7% を占めます。
This would be my key messages about the future of Japan. And at around the year 2000, the population of Japan had already peaked, and it has already entered into the phase of population decline. At the present, Japan's population ratio to the global population is slightly below 2%, but within 50 years, Japan's presence will be below 1%. However, amongst the developed economies, Japan's size will be second following the United States and will still account for 7% after 50 years.
高齢化の水準は現在世界でトップクラスです。今後本格的な高齢化を迎える多くの国が日本社会が高齢社会をどう乗り切るかに注目しています。高齢社会では高齢者に比べて若年者の意思が政治に反映されにくかったり、不利益を被る可能性もあります。積極的な是正が必要です。
The level of elderly ratio at the moment is at the top in the world. Going forward, many of the countries who will now enter the era of full-scale aging of the population are paying keen attention on Japan, looking at how Japan will overcome and survive this aging society. In an aged society, the younger generation's will or intention might be less reflected in the politics compared to the will or the intention of the senior citizens, and there is a possibility that the younger generation might suffer some inconvenience or disadvantages, and therefore there must be proactive correction measures.
また、現在未婚化が進んでいるので、今後は単身高齢者の増加が予想されます。その他、地方人口が減少する一方で、都市部では高齢者人口の増加が予想されており、対策が急務です。
At the moment, there are increase in number of people who do not get married, and therefore the increase of single elderly is expected to rise. At the same time, the population in the local communities will go down, but it is expected that the senior citizens number will increase in the urban areas, and therefore countermeasures will have to be prepared urgently.
このように日本の近い将来は人口に関わる難しい課題を抱えていますが、一方で日本社会は潜在力も持っています。
In this way, the near future of Japan does face difficult challenges related to the population, but at the same time, there are many potentials.
例えば、今後増加する高齢者は、これまでの高齢者と違い、高い教育を受け、より健康です。また、他の先進国に比べ、日本の女性は高学歴者割合がまだ低く、特に子育て世代の就業率の低い状態です。今後、さらに女性の高学歴化数により多くの女性が労働力に参加する可能性があります。
For example, the elderly people who is going to increase going forward could be highly educated and more healthier, different from what they used to be. And compared to other developed economies, the women in Japan, the ratio of them with higher education is still at a low level. And in particular, the ratio of a woman in the workforce in the child care age is still low, which means that going forward, there is a possibility that women will become more higher educated and that larger number of women could participate in the labor force.
また、日本は10代の出産が少ないため、女性の教育が阻害されず、子どもに資源も向けられるので、AI 化が進む中で、高度な人材を育成するのに有利です。
In the case of Japan, teenage birth level is low, which means that women's education will not be disrupted, and there will be resources that can be allocated to the children. And therefore, as AI spreads in our community, this would be an advantage in order to cultivate and nurture a higher skilled human talents.
最後に、現在日本における外国人の割合は低く、増加する余地が十分にあります。現在、周辺のアジア諸国は経済力が上がり、若い人材も豊富であるため、今後、欧州並みの流入が起きれば、日本の生産年齢人口の減少はある程度緩和されることになります。
And finally, at the moment, the proportion of non-Japanese in Japan is still low, so there is ample room to increase such a population. At the present, the economic powers of the Asian countries are rising, and they have abundant younger workforce and human talent. And therefore, going forward, if there could be an inflow of non-Japanese into Japan at the level commensurate seen in the European countries, then it is possible that the decline of working age population in Japan might be alleviated to a certain degree.
はい、以上で私の報告を終わります。
That is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
はい、岩沢さんどうもありがとうございました。
Thank you very much, Dr. Iwasawa.
日本の人口の減少と変化のメカニズム、そして そこから見た日本社会の未来ということにつきまして、非常に包括的にご説明をいただきました。
Thank you very much for discussing your observations about the mechanism of the demographic changes in Japan, as well as introducing your future vision about Japan in terms of the perspective of the population. And thank you very much for the comprehensive discussion.
それでは、これから質疑応答に移りたいと思います。質問は外国メディアの方からお受けします。質問のある方は画面にある Q&A の機能を使って書き込んでいただくか、手を挙げるのボタンで合図をしてください。私が指名した方は所属と名前を述べてから質問をお願いします。
We will start the questions and answer. We will invite the questions from the foreign media. You can text your question using the Q&A function on the screen, or you can also choose the raise your hand button. If I invite you to ask your question, please kindly tell us your name and affiliation before the question.
それではまず、事前にいただいた質問が2つございますので、こちらからご紹介をさせていただきます。
There have been two questions prior to start of the briefing, so let me first introduce those two.
まず1つ目、ブラジルのレディオセナードのフロリアン・ピルホ記者からです。英語で来ておりますので、そのまま読み上げます。
The first question is from Radio Senado Brazil, from reporter Mr. Floriano Filho, and I shall read the question that arrived in English.
What are the connections and implications between population decline and economic stagnation in Japan?
日本の人口減少と経済停滞はどのような関係があり、どのような含意、意味合いがあるのでしょうか。
私、答えてよろしいですか。
はい、
経済の、短期的変動と人口の長期的変動というのは、直接は関係が弱いところがあると思います。ただ経済の停滞というのを少し中長期で考えますと、やはりその90年代、日本は一番高齢者も少なく、子どもも少なく、働く人が多い時代だったんですけれども、それに比べるとですね、どうしても高齢者が多くなっていきますし、それからその働き手がいなくなって少なくなっていくということで、しかもそれがですね、日本全体なんですけど、例えば地域によって、特に人材が必要なところで足りなくなってくるというような、そういう地域的な偏り、あるいは産業的な偏りという形で、人が足りないってことが起きてきますと、やはりその経済には影響が出てくるというふうに考えております。
I would say that the direct link between short-term economic changes and the long-term demographic change is not that strong. The link is rather weak, but if you think about the economy in the medium and the longer term, compared to the 1990s, where the senior citizens was not too large and there were not too many children, which means that the large proportion of working age population was available in Japan. Compared to that time, in the present, there are more elderly population and less working age population. So looking at Japan as a whole, and in particular in some local regions or local communities, there is a serious lack of workforce or population, particularly in the regions and community where it is required to have a necessary workforce. So there are some imbalance in terms of the communities or the regions, as well as imbalance in terms of the sectors. So under such circumstances, indeed, the population trend will impact the economy.
はい、ありがとうございます。もう一問、これは中国の海信の松本武弘さんからの質問です。
Thank you very much. And the next question is from Kaishin of China, from Mr. Takehiro Matsumoto.
はい、近年の日本における人口変動はどのような経路でどのようなネガティブな影響を与えたというふうにお考えでしょうか。
Regarding the population changes in the recent time in Japan, by what route or pathway do you think that this demographic change occurred, and what negative impacts might have occurred?
はい、こちらも、先ほどの問いと少し関連、するものかもしれないですが、人口の、こうサイズ自体についてはですね、例えば小さい、少ない、人口の国でももうたくさんありまして、それが直ちに人口が少ないことっていうのがネガティブな
同じ質問ですね。
影響ではないんですけれども、ただネガティブな影響がどういう時に起きるかといいますと、やはりその変化があまりにも急激だという時だと思うんですね。やはりその社会がその人口に合わせて、こう変わらなければいけない時に、その時間の猶予がなく急激な変化が起きる時っていうのはやはりネガティブな影響があると思います。ですのでやはりこうなるべく先を読んで早く対応する、それから変化が急激にならないようにしてそういう対策を取るというのが重要ではないかなと思います。
It could be related to the earlier question, but these could happen even in countries with a smaller size of the population, and there could be multiple routes or pathways that cause the impact. And if negative impact do occur, I would say that those happen because the change happens so rapidly, almost all of a sudden or within a very limited short period. That means there is no time for the society to catch up and adapt to the changing environment of the circumstances. So when the change occurs too fast, the impact could become negative. So what I would say is important is to try to project earlier as possible in order to respond in sufficient time, or take countermeasures so that the expected changes would not be too sudden.
はい、ありがとうございます。それでは、手を挙げていらっしゃる方、2人いらっしゃいますので、まず最初にラジオフランスの西村かりんさんから、お願いします。
There are two persons who wish to ask the questions. First of all, Ms. Karin Nishimura, Radio France.
聞こえますか？
はい、聞こえます。
Can you hear me? Yes, we hear you.
はい、こんにちは。興味深い、プレゼンテーションありがとうございます。2点お願いします。1点目は、予想されている、例えば2065年の社会で暮らすことは可能でしょうか？っていうのは高齢者がそんなに多くて働き手はそんなに多くない可能性がありますので負担が大きいと思いますが本当に実際に今 どこでもその経験がないからよく考えたら不可能ではないかと思います。もう一つは可能になるために今からどういった政策に集中すべきでしょうか。例えば今まで政府は、いくつかの少子化対策をとってそれ、どちらかというと状況が変わらなくて失敗したと言ってもいいぐらいんですけれども、これからむしろ高齢者の豊かな環境を高齢者に優しい環境を作るための政策の方が重要ではないかと思います。
Thank you for the interesting presentations. Two questions. The number one about your projections about the time in the future like 2065. My big question, whether this kind of society is viable at all, because there will be too many elderly people and very little working age population, and the workload to support the dependent population will just be overwhelmingly too large, and no society has experienced this before. So is this kind of society viable at all in the first place? And the second question is, to make this future vision viable, what are the policies that we will have to emphasize starting now. So far, the government has tried some measures to deal with the declining birth rate, but I think we can say that it has failed because the situation has not changed. So going forward, I believe that what is important is to emphasize more, to create kind public policies for the elderly citizens so that they can live comfortably. What are your observations?
はい、ご質問ありがとうございました。その2065年、日本はそんなので生活できるかということなんですが、私、人口の問題を長年やっておりますが、例えば今から65年前というのを考えたときにですね、その1950年代とか60年代という時に考えたときに、当時もですね、戦争が終わって、日本ももう本当に今から作り上げないといけないという時代で、これからどうなるのかという心配な声もありましたし、人口に関してはですね、すごく逆に子どもがたくさんいてですね、このままでは生活していけないという心配があったんですね。ところがやっぱりそういう予測に反したことがその後起きていきました。でこれは世界各国で見てもやはり、60年先というのはなかなか予測できないところがありまして、それで実際にはうまく乗り越えてきているという歴史もあるんですね。ですので私は今まで乗り越えてきたようにやはり人々の英知を集めれば方策はあるんではないかとある種希望も持って考えております。それで具体的にどうするのかという話ですが、一つは例えばヨーロッパ出生力が低くなったヨーロッパがどのように対応したかというのを見ますと、やはり一つは外国から人が入ってきて、それが社会を支えているという例がありますので、日本もある程度そういう余地はあるんではないかなと思います。それで少子化が有効ではないので、高齢者にということなんですが、これは先ほど申し上げましたが、やはり出生力が低いということはより人口の構造の変化を急激に進めることになります。ですからやはり出生力というのはある程度維持するということで社会の人口構造の変化をあまりにもいびつにしないようにするということは重要ではないかと思います。で一方で高齢者についてはこれもプレゼンテーションで申し上げましたが、50年前の高齢者とおそらく今後の高齢者というのは、体力もそれからその中を考え方とかそういうものも全く違ってきますので、やはりそういう新しい高齢者に合う社会を作っていくということが重要ではないかなと思っております。
Thank you for the questions. Whether the year 2065, whether Japanese society will be viable at all. In my position, as I have studied the population for many years, if we think about it like 60 years ago, like in the 1950s or the 1960s, that was after the war. And already Japan was trying to rebuild, but they did have concerns and worries back then. Contrary to the current situation, they were worried because there were so many babies being born, and they expected that the Japanese society would not be viable just with too much increase of the population. However, what actually happened was against these expectations. So across the world, many countries did have difficulty in correctly expecting what might happen with their population 60 years into the future. But then there is the actual history, the actual achievement that countries have managed to deal with the situation and have overcome such worries. So just like we have managed to overcome those worries and the concerns, I do have a positive hope that there will be possible measures that we can take if we collect our wisdom and think hard. And about the second part of your question, if we observe Europe as to how they dealt with their declining birth rate, they invited more people from other countries, and now they are supporting the societies in the European countries. So similarly, I think that is also possible more in Japan. About the failed response to stop the declining birth rate in this country and to focus more on countermeasures to give comfortable life to the elderly going forward. As I discussed earlier, the problem is the too rapid change of the structure caused by declining birth rate. Indeed, a certain level of fertility should be maintained so that the change in the population structure does not occur too rapidly or all of a sudden, and distorted change, extremely imbalanced change in the population structure must be avoided. I also mentioned this, but the elderly people are very different from what they used to be like 50 years ago, and the present elderly and the future elderly population, their physical strength or the health status or their mindset, way of thinking, the elderly population from the past and today and future will be very different. And therefore, what is important, I believe, is to prepare the society and the environment that will be conducive to the coming new batch of elderly population.
ありがとうございます。それではもう一人手を挙げていらっしゃる、ニューヨークタイムズの市本さん。
And from New York Times, Ms. Rich Motoko.
はい、どうもありがとうございます。興味深いのプレゼンテーションをどうもありがとうございます。I wonder if there's a different way of looking at this, which is that maybe it's okay if the population goes down. Japan once had a population half the size that it is now. Is it possible that, for environmental and other reasons, it might be healthy to allow the population to decline and not worry about it so much?
大変興味深いプレゼンテーションありがとうございました。違う見方はできないでしょうか。別に人口が減っても問題はないと。以前の日本も今の人口の半分ぐらいの時代が過去にはあったわけですから、環境とかその他の観点から考えれば、むしろ減った方が健全と言えるということはないでしょうか。
ありがとうございます。おそらく、日本のどの方もですね、この今の人口減少をまた元に戻すというか、増やそうというふうに現実的に思っている人はいないと思うんですね。もう減るのはもう当然だと思っています。ただ、先ほど申したように、できるだけ緩やかに減るというのが、一番社会にとっては負担がないと。そういう観点で、もし例えば子供が欲しいけれども産めないという人がいるなら、できるだけ産めるように、するとかですね、高齢者はより健康に、活躍していただけるようにするっていう形で、対策を取ると。ただ本当にもう人口が減らないとか、増えるということはもう考えられないですし、もう日本社会そのように考えている人はいないというふうに考えています。
Thank you for the question. So I don't think there is anyone now in Japan who is realistically trying to think about increasing the population so that it will go back to what it used to be or restore the lost number of population. I think it is widely accepted that the decline of the population is going to happen quite naturally, and that is the reality. So I suggest that the important point is that the expected decline should not be too rapid, or it should be as gradual as possible, so that the burden onto the society would be the smallest as possible, which means that if there are people who wish to have a baby but are not able to have a baby, then there could be policies to support such people, or to enable the elderly population to stay more healthier so that they can continue to be active in the society. So I don't think there is anyone who is thinking about how to stop the population from dropping or how to increase the population again.
はい、ありがとうございます。それでは、Q&A に寄せられた質問で、ロシアセゴーニャのシュミロワさんからの質問を読み上げます。
There is a question that has arrived at the Q&A section from Russia Solnet Media. I will read the question.
In your opinion, what are the main reasons for the declining Japanese population? Do you think that one of the important elements or explanation can be found in the culture itself? Japan's case is totally within the common world trend of declining population in developed countries, and there are no specific differences.
日本における人口減少の理由について一番大きな要因は何だと考えておられるのか、あるいはカルチャーとか文化とか社会の文化自体が原因であるのか、他の先進国と比べて日本特異の理由、独特の理由などはあるのか、違いがあるのか。
ありがとうございます。減少の一番の要因はやはり出生数が減っているということだと思います。で、さらに最近ではその母親になる世代の人口も減っているので、母親の世代が減れば、ますます子どもが減るというそういう理由になっています。で、その要因ですが、やはり結婚するとか子どもを持つということを、当たり前、常識っていうような捉え方をしている日本人が昔は多かったわけですけれども、今はそれは人それぞれといいますか、自分で、家族を持たないという生き方もあるというふうに捉える人が増えてきているというふうには思います。で、特にその家族という意味では、やはりその国によってパートナーを持つこと、それから子どもを持つことということに価値を高く持つ国というのはやはり出生数も高いですけれども、そういうことよりも他のライフスタイル、あるいは個人の生活というものを大切にしたいっていう、そういう考え方が増えれば、やはり子どもを産む人は少なくなってきていると思いますし、日本はそういう意味ではやはり価値観が若い人の価値観が変わってきているということがあるんではないかと思います。
Thank you for the question. The largest reason of the population decline is the drop in the fertility. If the woman's generation who would possibly become mothers shrink, then naturally, of course, there will be further decline in babies who would be born from the shrinking band of women in the age of child birth. So another reason is it is no longer a common sense or a natural given to get married and to have children. In the past, there were many more people who thought it was only natural to get married and to have children. But now the time has changed, and the culture now is that, of course, all people have different ways of thinking or different choice. And of course, it is recognized that some people will positively choose not to have a family for their lifestyle. And if such people increase, the fertility also will go down. It will depend on the sense of value of different countries and cultures. In countries where it is considered valuable and important to have a partner in your life or to have children, naturally the fertility in such countries will be higher. But if there are increasing people who think that they want a different lifestyle from what was common in the past, or they think that living on their own to have your individual, personal way of life is more important, then there will be fewer people who choose to give birth to babies. So in that way, the values of the younger generation has also changed, which is also a reason.
はい、ありがとうございます。それではもう一問、Q&A に入っている質問です。韓国の経済新聞、ジョン・ヨンヒさんからです。
And another question that has arrived in the Q&A, John-san from the Korean newspaper, Korea Economic Daily.
1995年 1.26 ショック以降、日本政府が少子化対策に大きな予算を投入しましたが、日本の出生率は下がりつつあります。政策がうまくいかなかった理由は何でしょうか。
はい、
There was the so-called 1.26 fertility shock back in 1995, and the government of Japan made a massive effort and investment in order to reverse the declining fertility rate, but it has continued to go down. What do you think was the reason of the unsuccessful policies?
出生に対する、あるいは家族のサポートに関する対策が大変たくさん日本で行われました。でそれの効果をですね、やはりその出生率とか出生数だけでの多寡だけで評価するというのはややちょっと乱暴といいますか、実はやはりその効いた政策もあれば効かなかった政策もあるというところだと思うんですね。それで確かに出生率というものがそんなに高くなってはいないんですが、細かく見るとですね、例えば80年代、90年代は高学歴の女性の出生率が低かったんですけれども、そういう方たちが増えての出生率が高くなってきたとかですね、あるいはその都市部の出生率の低下というのが大変著しく低かったんですが、それも最近少しまた戻ってきたというような、細かく見ると政策の効果が出てきているんではないかなということもあります。ただ、やはりその全体的にまだ上がっていないということは、それとはまた別の原因で、例えば地方で以前よりも子どもが持ちにくくなっているようなことがあるとかですね、地方の経済の問題で結婚を しにくくなっているとか、そういうまた別の要因が次々起きているというところもありまして、そこはやはり丁寧に見ていって、どの政策は効果があったけれども、まだ足りないところがあるというのを丁寧に見ていく必要があるんではないかなと思います。
Indeed, it is true that so many policies have been implemented in this country in terms of fertility or family support. But I would say that it would be too rash or almost reckless to make a jump to a quick conclusion just by looking at the stagnant fertility or the high or the low of the absolute number of birth, because if you analyze more carefully, there are policies that have been effective and those that have not really been effective. But having said that, it is true that overall the fertility has not risen so much. But if you look at the breakdown of all the information more carefully, there has been some positive effects in some of the indicators. For example, back in the 1980s or the 1990s, the fertility was very low for highly educated women, but it started to come up again. And also there was a significant lower fertility in the larger urban areas, but that has started to come back again in the more recent time. So if you analyze it carefully, you will find some areas where there has been positive outcome because of the implemented policies. Having said that, on the whole, it has not risen as expected, but there are other reasons that are arising one after another, which is causing it difficult to have children in the local communities in particular. That might be because of economic circumstances, which make it difficult for people to decide to get married. So if we analyze more carefully, I think we can find the policies that have been found to be effective, and it could be done in a larger scale.
はい、ありがとうございます。それでは最後の質問を、手を挙げていらっしゃる海信の増友さん。
And Mr. Mastomo from Kaisin, this would be the last question.
ありがとうございます。簡単にお伺いしたいんですが、まずプレゼンテーションの中でいわゆるグリーンデモクラシーの問題について触れていらっしゃったと思うんですが、それを是正するために何か方法っていうのは何か思いつくこと何かありますか？それともう一つ簡単にアジアで特に中国とかでも豊かになる前にもう老化が始まるっていう現象、人口減とかも始まってますが、日本の経験から何かアドバイスとか何か言えることがあれば教えてください。
Thank you for the presentation. I think you implied about green democracy. And are there any ways to correct this situation? And looking at other countries in Asia, such as China, for example, the population is starting to age and decline even before they have become prosperous. So are there any advices from Japan that has a prior experience?
ありがとうございます。グレイデモクラシー、そうですね。なかなかこの今の民主主義のこの多数決の社会では、なかなか難しいと思います。だからこれは、やっぱりそういうことを皆さん認識して、若い世代に目を向けるような議論を、醸成していくというのが、今のところできることではないかなというふうに思っています。それからその中国、はい。
The green democracy, indeed, that's a difficult matter because in this world of democracy, where it is decided by majority decisions, it might be difficult, but maybe one possibility is to try to cultivate and raise an awareness to pay more attention to the younger generation.
からもう一つ、その中国とか今から高齢化、人口減少が始まっていくという国については、そうは言ってもですね、例えば日本やヨーロッパはもうすでに本当に人口ボーナスの時代が終わってしまいましたが、まさにこれから今ちょうど迎えている国については、やはりこの3、40年先を見据えて、今のうちに制度を変えたり、そういう高齢化がこれから起きるということを前提に制度を作っていくとかですね、あるいは今のこの経済力があるうちに対応するということをぜひやっていただくっていうのがもう本当にアドバイス、この過ぎた国からはアドバイスだというふうに思っています。
As for advices to countries such as China, where they will see a decline in the population and the aging of their population, and even in Japan and Europe, where the population bonus time already has gone past, and there are countries who are going to experience this into the future, I think any advices that might be provided from a country that has already gone through that experience, I would say is try to look into the future like 30 or 40 years compared to the present and try to proactively change the systems and the institutions beforehand. So try to make your systems or the institutions with the assumption and expectation that your population will age in the future. The advice would be that try to implement the responses prior at this time when you still have the economic energy to do so.
はい、どうもありがとうございます。それでは時間をすでにオーバーしておりますので、本日のプレスブリーフィングはこれで終了とさせていただきます。
Thank you very much indeed. We have gone beyond the allocated time, but thank you very much for the excellent presentation discussion.
岩沢さんには大変貴重なお時間をお忙しい中いただきましてどうもありがとうございました。
ありがとうございました。
And very special thank you to Dr. Iwasawa for your excellent presentation when you're so busy.
参加していただいた皆さんもどうもありがとうございました。
Thank you to all the participants and the audience.
それではこれで本日のブリーフィングを終了いたします。
End of the briefing.
Thank you. ありがとうございます。